This is the training video for the Sony RX10 Mark II. So we have 3 of these cameras and they come in this little Domke case. On the outside of the case, there should be an instruction manual. However, I would recommend that you look online for the full manual, which is much more detailed. This really doesn't have that much information in it. Now, inside the case, you're going to find a few things. Number one, of course, being the camera here. Note how it is placed in the bag. Pull it out, set it down here for a moment, and just going to show you the rest of the contents of the bag here. We've got a blower for cleaning your lens, lens cleaning solution, and a lens cleaning cloth is over here. So that's in the top, the left side of the bag. In the front pocket is where you're going to find the carrying strap, any additional batteries, and a charger. The charger actually connects to the side of the camera here. You would just plug it in and connect it to power, and you can charge the internal battery that way. Please make sure to check that all those contents are in the case when you check it out, as well as in the case when you return it. So let's talk about this little camera. What does this camera do and why is it so special? Why do we have it? Well, it's a fixed lens camera in the sense that it doesn't have a removable lens, but the lens that's built into it is the equivalent of a 24mm to 200, so it has quite a great range from wide to telephoto. And it's at a constant f2.8 aperture when you open it. It also shoots 4K internally, and it shoots 1920 by 1080, the standard HD resolution, at up to 120 frames per second. And it can also do a special high frame rate mode where it can record up to 240, 480, or 960 frames per second for short bursts of up to 2 seconds long. So let's just kind of go through the buttons, the menus, and the features of this camera. You have a lens cap. Please do not lose these. And it comes with a UV protection filter on it. Some of the buttons it has on it here. On the top left, there's a dial that allows you to change between a bunch of different settings. And let me just kind of show you a couple of them. The one that you're going to use the most often, most likely, is this video mode here. HFR stands for high frame rate. And then the rest of them are various different, this would be panoramic and various different photography settings like program, aperture, shutter, and manual. So for the most part, I'm just going to leave it here on video. It does have a built-in flash. It does have a built-in hot shoe. And this is the flash button. This button here, let's just go ahead and turn it on. If you push this button here, it just lights up the display here so you can read it at night. This zooms the camera in and zooms the camera out. Then we have the ability to change our exposure in certain modes to go plus or minus. Don't use this when you're on manual mode, doesn't work. The microphones are here. Shutter button is here. Movie button is here, and this is how you start and stop recordings. When you try to start a movie by pushing the shutter button, it just gives you an error. So you have to start by pushing this button to make a movie. This button here allows you to change the aperture. Let's see. I'm sorry, not the aperture, the shutter speed. As you can see, when I turn it, the shutter speed gets faster and faster. And to the left, slower and slower, and the image gets brighter. And we have various different buttons that are custom mapped to different things that I'm going to show you in a moment here. And the menu button is located here. Also notice that the camera has an eye sensor. When you put your finger or your eye up to it, the screen on the back will turn off and the screen on the inside will turn on. So you can put your eye right up to it and see what you're doing. So another thing that's really nice about this camera is the built-in viewfinder. It can pull back. It's very fragile, so just be gentle with it, but you can change the angle that it's displaying at. Even bend it down a little bit before it gets in the way of the tripod plate here. comes on the camera, and you should have no reason to remove it. If you do need to remove it though, you'll need to use either like a penny or a quarter or a screwdriver. Just be careful when you put it back on that you do it gently and carefully. The battery goes in here. Pull back the blue tab to pop the battery out. The SD card goes in here. You pull this back. The SD card actually goes in backwards. It's kind of strange, but that's the way it goes in. Normally you would put them in this way, but on this camera, they go in backwards, all right? A couple other buttons you need to know about is on the front here, you have your focus settings. Manual focus for MF, C as for constant, S is for single. So C is the camera's gonna try, if you rotate it to C here, it's gonna try to keep everything in focus for you constantly. S, it will focus when you hold down the shutter halfway. Now, when you're in autofocus mode, if you adjust the focus ring, it actually zooms the camera in and out. But when you're in manual focus mode, that's how you focus. So when you're turning the ring, it starts to zoom, it's because you're not in manual focus mode, all right? One other button to know about is on the bottom of the lens here, you have click on and off. With click on, your aperture ring changes like a standard photographic lens and clicks. Increments of 1/3 of a f-stop, or 1/3 of a stop. And now when I turn it off, it rotates smoothly between all the stops, which is much better for video. Okay, let's begin with the menu system. Couple things to know about here. If I hit the menu button, let's start at the beginning here. Very first page. These are for the photography settings on the camera. I don't think you need to worry about these. Go to the next page, file format. This is where we can select between 4K and high definition. If you select 4K, I recommend you shoot at 24p, 100 megabits a second, although you can shoot at lower settings if you would prefer, or 30p if you would prefer. Let's go back to 4K and change it down to HD. Now this is high definition, which is 4 times less resolution than 4K. And look at all the different recording settings we have here. We can record at, these are all 50 megabits a second, and 24p would be kind of your standard bread and butter. And of course, the more megabits a second, the higher the quality of the video, also the less time you can record on the card. Just keep in mind, whatever you select here for your frame rate, to double your shutter speed. So 24p, you need to have a shutter speed of 1/50th of a second. But if you go up to 120p, you're going to want your shutter speed to be 1/240th of a second, okay? So that means that with shooting in 120p, you're going to need more light because your shutter is going to be open for a shorter amount of time. So 24p is going to be the best for low light shooting. I'm going to just leave it on 24p right now. HFR settings. Let's get into that later. That's high frame rate. I'm going to keep going here. Nothing you need to know there. This is where you can change your ISO. Now, I'm going to show you that I have a bunch of these settings mapped to certain buttons that are going to save you time, so you don't have to go into the menu to change them. But if I take my ISO and I bring it down, you can watch the screen get darker. If I go up, you can watch the screen get brighter. So I'm going to take it down to 800, which is the base ISO. That's kind of where it should be. It should be no lower than that for this camera, especially when you're shooting in Sony Gamma, which we're going to talk about in a little bit here. Next page, neutral density filter. Look what happens when I turn it on. The image gets darker. 3 stops darker. This is one of the great features of these cameras, is even though they're so small and portable, they have built-in neutral density filter, which is really helpful when it's bright outside. It's like sunglasses for your camera. White balance mode, check it out. Here's what you've got. I'm going to first of all just make this a little bit brighter so we can see. And you should be able to see the color changing. So I'm going to go here to auto white balance. Now auto is great for when you're just running and gunning it and you want to get a close white balance where the color will look accurate to the way it's used to looking on your eyes. However, Auto is not great for like doing an interview for a long period of time, where perhaps the color would shift over time, because auto, you can't trust that it's just going to stay the same. Perhaps somebody steps in front of the light and the camera thinks that the light color has changed. And so I've seen a lot of times where color shifts over time when you leave it on auto. So I don't ever leave it on auto when I use it because of that. I want to have control. And that's one of the nice things about this camera, is it has a bunch of presets. So if you know you're shooting under daylight, just go down to the sun icon there and it says daylight, and your colors will be accurate if you're shooting on a sunny day. If you're shooting in the shade, select shade. If it's a cloudy day and you're shooting, under the clouds, select cloudy day. Incandescent light, that's that warm light, like a tungsten light. Go ahead and select that, and your color will be accurate. And then there's a bunch of different kinds of fluorescence. If you're not sure which ones you have, just look at the screen, and if it looks right, you're probably pretty close. But there's a bunch of times where we're shooting in mixed light, where maybe you have a light from a window coming in and a fluorescent on, or maybe you just want to make sure, which all professional cinematographers would be, they want to make sure they're shooting under the right color temperature. So you have a couple options. The first one is here to go in and manually dial in your Kelvin temperature. And that's what this icon here means. If you hit the right button on the display jog wheel, it goes to the right and allows me to adjust the color temperature manually. So I can just dial up a number. It's going to get more and more yellow as I go higher. And as I go lower, it's going to get bluer and bluer. All right. Now, one more thing you can do, and that is there's 3 different custom presets for white balance. This is where you tell the camera what white is, and you can save them in 3 different presets you can pull up at any time. To do that, you got to go down here to set. But unfortunately, we can't set the white balance when it's in movie mode. You have to rotate the dial here on the top to M, or one of the other ones like S, A, or P. And what we're going to need to do is fill the frame with white. So I hit menu, white balance, set. I'm going to push the middle button now to capture that white balance. Oh, what happened? It's green. Well, this is a weird glitch with the cameras, but here's the only way to fix that. That's because of the special Sony gamma that we've got, which is just kind of confusing the camera. To manually white balance the camera, go to picture profile, change it from picture profile 7 to one of the other picture profiles. This is temporary. And now we're going to just point the camera at something white and fill the screen with it. I'm going to make sure to darken the camera down enough that it doesn't overexpose it. You can see my frame is filled with white. I'm going to push that middle button, and this is what comes back from the camera after that. As you can see, it's got the white frame in the background, and it's got the proper color of white. So now when I hit OK, my camera is white balanced. I can rotate my knob back to movie mode, and I'm good to go. Just so you know what picture profiles are about, picture profiles are different ways that the camera can interpret contrast and gamma and color. You really only need to know this. Picture profile 7, when you select it, let's go back there, hit the right arrow button, and you can see that Sony or S-Log2 is selected as the gamma setting. Please never change that. That is what gives picture profile 7 its magic and allows it to capture a higher dynamic range. But you're going to need to add contrast and saturation in post when you're editing to make the picture look usable. So if you want to shoot with the picture profile that just looks good right out of the camera, I would select either picture profile off or look through some of these other picture profiles and select one that looks good. And it's going to look great just coming right out of the camera. It's not going to need any post-processing. But picture profile 7 does give you some added power in that it gives you a higher dynamic range, which is really helpful for shooting in conditions where you have a great contrast ratio between dark and light. Okay, let's keep going through the menus here. Next page, I don't think there's anything here you need to know. Or there. Let's go to this setting. Make sure you leave it on manual exposure for movie mode, otherwise it's going to be trying to control the exposure for you, and you really don't want that. I would leave all these settings as you see them here on the screen. Make sure audio recording is on. If it's too low or too loud, you can change the recording level for the sound here. hit menu to go back, and that should be everything for the first camera menu. Now if we go to the next page, we're at the main settings for, this is just the next menu, and Sony's menus are kind of a mess, so this is just how it works. But let's quickly show you what Zebra does. If you don't know what Zebra does, I'm going to leave it at 100 plus. 0, if you think about 0% being pure black and 100 being pure white, zebras are only going to show up because of my setting on areas of the image that are over 100%. So currently I don't see any zebras. Let's open our aperture up all the way. Let's boost our, I think our ISO is already quite boosted. Let's open up our, make our shutter speed a little slower. Now you can see that the image is covered with zebras all over. Now that is what's telling me where the image is overexposed. So as I darken my image up, you can see that those start to go away. Very useful for knowing what parts of your image are overexposed. You can go in here and change those to different values if you know what and why you're doing that, but otherwise please leave it at 100%. Manual focus assist, I leave that off. It's quite annoying. Otherwise, every time you try to focus, it zooms in like this. Turn the focus ring and it zooms in. Or not. Not sure why it's not doing it now. But when it does it, it's quite annoying. It does something like this. So I like to leave manual focus assist off. Don't think there's anything else you need to know there. Peaking level here is where you can change how high the red outlines for what's in focus are. And I'll show you, if I go, let's see, low, high, medium, and low, and off. You should be able to see those red lines on what part of the image is in focus as they get more and more saturated with red. And that's just to help you, again, if you're shooting something and you're using peaking to help you tell what's in focus and everything's red all over the image because everything in your image is sharp, you just turn peaking down a bit so it only shows you the parts that are sharpest. And then again, if you can't see anything's red at all, you can turn it up and you get more saturation of red. And turn it off altogether if it's annoying you. Very helpful for telling what part of your image is in focus. And you can change what that peaking color is. Now, if you go here to application list, this is like under this menu here, I have a special application called time-lapse mode. Let's turn that on. This is a paid app that I purchased for the phone that allows, for the camera, that allows you to shoot in a time-lapse mode. So we've got a rotator dial up here on the top to M for mode. And we can, there we go, function disabled. Maybe if I hit menu, it'll come up and allow me to change the settings here, application settings. So I can change interval, which is the time between shots. So, and it's telling me down there, 3 seconds or 4 seconds. So you can change how many seconds between each shot that it takes, and then how many shots total before it finishes the time lapse and stops doing it. Those are the main settings you need, but you can also decide if it wants to make a movie for you, or like a bunch of images, or over here, a movie and a bunch of images. You can do both for you. So kind of cool ways of doing great time-lapse modes. The true power in this is that you can shoot raw 20 megapixel photos in a time-lapse mode, which gives you so much more dynamic range and the ability to like make it look really good and super high resolution. So do experiment with this if you like time lapses. All right, hit the menu button. Let's exit the application and go back to our main menu. And let me just make sure I show you here how to format. That's going to be like almost the very last page. Format, all data will be formatted on card, hit enter, and that would just delete any shots you have on the camera, okay? Now, 2 more things I really need to show you. That's the shortcut menus that I have in high frame rate mode. So, all those things I showed you, the menu system's kind of complex, right? Well, I've mapped a bunch of those settings to buttons on the camera. So let's start with the top right. This is custom button 1. If I push this button, it pulls up the ISO screen. So here I can change my ISO. Again, you can't go lower than 800, especially when you have picture profile 7 selected. But with another picture profile, you could go lower if you want. You're going to lose dynamic range, but it will help you darken your image up. So again, if you want a shortcut for the ISO, just push custom 1 and make your selection. Next, custom 2 down here at the bottom right. This is your neutral density filter. On, or now it's off, on, off, on, off. That's easy, right? Custom 2, custom 1. What other ones do we have? Well, this jog wheel. The top button cycles through display mode, shows us different things on the heads-up display. Just keep cycling through them. You even get over here a little histogram if you want. This is really helpful for judging exposure. And there's your levels for telling if it's level or not. So, top button, that's easy. Cycles through different display modes for what's up on the heads-up display. The right, this pulls up the shortcut to white balance. So you make your selection, hit middle button, done. Bottom, this is like if I hit, it's like a digital zoom in if I want to help me with focusing. I don't really know that this is particularly useful, but I went ahead and mapped it there because I couldn't think of anything better to put. So down button, push the middle button after that, and it digitally crops in. You can then adjust your focus until desired, wait for a couple seconds, it goes away. Left button, peaking. This is where we can change the peaking intensity from off, low, medium, and high, all right? Super easy. So just play around with those buttons. They're already there. They're already mapped. Now, the other feature this camera is really good, really well known for is slow motion. So rotate your dial to HFR, high frame rate. All right. It's a little wonky the way it works, but I'm going to go ahead and boost my ISO up really high just because I'm shooting in a dark room right now and I don't have a lot of light. I'm going to open my aperture up all the way. Let's see. It doesn't seem to be responding accurately to my aperture. I'm going to just go ahead and pull out of this mode for a minute. There we go. Let's go back to high frame rate mode. Maybe it's because my ISO, it is, interestingly enough, for some reason certain ISOs limit what my aperture can be at. Making sure my neutral density is off. So this is maybe not the best example because it's very dark in here, but let's go ahead and show you. We're on HFR mode on the dial at the top. Hit the menu button. And let's go to the HFR setting page here, which is there, HFR settings. This is where we can select our record settings. Please always leave this at 24p 50m. You're never going to want to do something different than that. At least I can't think of a reason why you would. Frame rate, 240, 480, or 960. Keep in mind that 240 is going to look pretty good, 480 is not very high resolution, and 960 is mostly unusable for a high definition video. It's just not going to look high enough quality, all right? You can get away with 480, but you're going to need to make sure you overexpose your image by a stop or two so that you can crush it down in post and kill any noise in the dark areas with it. Really, it's the same for 240. I would still always try to overexpose, all right? Quality priority, you have quality or shoot time. Quality priority lets you shoot for 2 seconds. Shoot time priority lets you shoot for 4 seconds. I would never shoot with shoot time because it's going to look crappy. Shoot with quality priority. It's going to give you the best quality. And this is really cool. Record timing. Start trigger or end trigger. Basically, that means that when I hit record, is it going to record from when I push the button for the next 2 seconds, or is it going to record from the 2 seconds before I hit the record button? If you hit end trigger, it's going to record the first 2 seconds before I hit record. This is really useful if you're trying to film something in slow motion that you're not sure when it's going to happen, like an animal doing some kind of activity or something. As long as you keep the camera framed properly and everything, and then the action happens, hit the record button, and anything that happened before it will be recorded. Opposite is true if you hit start trigger. Start trigger means it doesn't start recording until you hit record. So for this demo, I'm going to hit end trigger, hit menu to back out of this page, and here we are. We're in HFR mode, but we haven't done anything yet. If I try to hit the record button right here, watch what happens. It gives you a warning that it can't do it. That's because it's dorky, but you have to hit the middle button to arm it for recording. And once you've done that, you can't do anything. You can't change focus, you can't change exposure, you can't add a neutral density filter. The camera is useless, but you can at least hit the record button. So I'm gonna snap my fingers here in the screen, and I'm gonna record it now. Remember, I had end trigger, so that's why I snapped my fingers first before I hit record. Then you can watch the screen play back the recording. Basically what it's doing now is it's copying what it recorded from the buffer on the memory of the camera onto the SD card. And it takes real time. So if you're recording at 240 frames a second, it's going to take 20 seconds to copy. If you're at 480, it's going to take 40 seconds to copy. And if you're at 960, it's going to take 80 seconds to copy. So there you go. We just recorded a high frame rate video. To play it back, we can just hit the playback button down here, hit the middle button, and there it goes, playing it back in super slow motion. We can go much, much slower if we'd like, but I just chose to record at 240 frames a second. Okay, when you put the card in the computer, you'll see a folder called Private. And M4 root is where you should find your clips. Go inside clip, and there they are. For some reason, it creates an XML file as well. Sometimes the easiest way to get stuff off the card is just to sort by kind, select all the MP4 files, copy them to your external hard drive in a folder you want, and then you can just directly import those files into your computer and you're good to go. So this is some of that slow motion stuff that we recorded earlier, playing back on my computer. So that's all there is to it. Don't get caught up in going to these other folders. Just remember Private, M4 root, clip, and that's where you'll find your footage. All right, I think that should cover the majority of the features of this camera. Have fun out there.